Welcome to episode 4 of The Catch Up, a new podcast from The Daily Catch where we take you inside the news. My name is Walter Mullin, and I'm the publisher of The Daily Catch.
Hi, Walter. It's great to be back.
Welcome back, Emily.
Yeah, it took me a minute to catch up there.
So you've been away on assignment. Why don't you just give our listeners a sneak preview of where you were and what is in the works?
Yeah, so I was on a personal vacation for a couple weeks in Bhutan, and I decided that I would extend the trip and go over to Hanoi to meet with the family of Lynn Nguyen, who is the girl who died just about a year ago, May 25th, after her Bard graduation, piano student. And I've been in touch with her family over the course of the last year as we've been waiting for information on the indictment and so forth against the driver who killed her. And it was just really wonderful to see them and talk about how they've been doing over the last year.
And we'll be doing a story about this in a few weeks.
We will, in celebration and commemoration of her life and in memory of her suffering. We're going to be doing a large takeout feature. So our listeners today can be ready for that on May 25th.
Good. Well, welcome back. It's good to have you back in front of the microphone.
Thank you. Good to be here.
In this podcast, we discuss stories that have appeared in the Daily Catch. We give you insights into how we put the stories together, offer some additional observations, and discuss where the stories may be heading as we move forward. Emily, are you ready to catch up?
I am, Walter. Hit me.
All right. Our first topic today is a story that we reported on last week. The Town of Rhinebeck has sued to stop the Six Senses Resort development from going forward.
Yes.
Can you give our listeners kind of a full background on what the resort is and the complexities of the story?
Yes, absolutely. So funny that we're talking about Six Senses. When I was over in Asia, I actually saw 2 Six Senses resorts. I'd never heard of this company or this project before, but these are very large, very ambitious, very luxury developments devoted to, how can I describe it? They're kind of spa-like, conference centers / spas. Six Senses is a brand that's owned by IHG, the Intercontinental Hotel Group. People listening may have heard of IHG. They own Holiday Inn, they own Crowne Plaza, they own the Hotel Indigo boutique chain. The Six Senses property here in Dutchess County would be straddling Hyde Park, but is largely located in Clinton. Their access point would come through Hyde Park. Has nothing to do technically with Rhinebeck, so we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. This would be their first U.S. property. It's a $200 million resort, and it's going to be built on the site that was formerly the Old Stone Barn. Some people may know it as the Duchess Hotel, which IHG bought in November 2022 for about $13 million. So they're significantly upgrading the facility. It's a 236-acre property. It would have 24 buildings on it, 40,000 square foot spa, multiple pools, 65 guest units designed to accommodate about 240 guests. So I think of it as the 1 guest per acre property, 236 acres, 240 guests. There will be 27 new buildings, 11 of which will contain guest rooms. There will be dining and fitness and wellness facilities, operational buildings, new parking areas. Very, very large project. And it would also host weddings and other events, potentially exceeding that 240 per person project size. So that's kind of the background of it.
So what's the problem? Why did the Town of Rhinebeck file a lawsuit?
Before we actually talk about that, I think what would be helpful is to talk about all of the conundrums and issues that have faced the project so far, before Rhinebeck even got involved in it. So one problem initially was that the IHG people were claiming that this was a conference center. They still hold to that view. And a group of people called Common Senses, a citizen group, got together and said, no, this is a hotel. So the first problem that the project faced was getting their classification changed.
And why is a conference center different from a hotel?
Yeah. So a hotel is, as you know, guest rooms, right? A conference center exists for other purposes, namely to host conferences. And I leave it to listeners to decide what they think it sounds like. To me, it sounds like a hotel with a conference center capacity, but they've been successful in getting the project by the Clinton Zoning Board declared to be a conference center.
Are conference centers more easily approved?
Yes, in this area, in Clinton, in this parcel, a conference center is acceptable. So that was hurdle number one. The next hurdle has to do with access to the conference center site or to the hotel site. And there is no access through the town of Clinton. So they have had to work with the town of Hyde Park. They own a parcel, a very thin strip that has access to a road off 9G into the property. And a deal has been struck between the town of Hyde Park, the town of Clinton, and the developer to allow for that access point to come in. Without that, they can't build. They have to get the approval of Hyde Park. And it looks to me, the unbiased, objective reporter or editor on the project, it looks like the town of Hyde Park and the town of Clinton very much want to see this project come to fruition. And in fact, there are people in Rhinebeck who do as well. There are businesses, there are restaurants that want the business that they believe will accrue as a result of the development of Hyde Park.
Well,
of Six Senses.
It solves a couple problems. It's going to create jobs for people here, and it's going to create more places for people to sleep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. We have an issue, as we all know, with accommodations, insufficient accommodations, and so forth. So this will address that. It's also going to be an ambitiously, probably very beautiful project, right? It will be beautifully decorated. There will be facilities. It'll open up another wedding venue. So there are reasons for people to support it. The town of Rhinebeck, to your question a moment ago, however, is concerned about undue traffic on Route 9. They're also concerned about environmental impacts. So the town of Rhinebeck has decided to bring suit in concert with the Common Sense's individual residents' complaint and hopes to block the development.
Do we know what the next step in this story is going to be or where it's going to go?
I think we'll have to see what the judge who hears the case decides. First of all, some may raise the question, I would imagine the defendants in this case or the party that's being sued, as to whether Rhinebeck actually has standing to bring this suit. They aren't a party to the development directly. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have to assert a pretty clear reason for their attack on the project.
And if the towns of Clinton and Hyde Park have approved it, yeah.
We'll have to see what the judge decides to do next. But that's the next hurdle in this very interesting development.
So to your point, how can Rhinebeck sue in a case that's outside its borders?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
And is the fact of traffic alone or concerns about particular environmental species, birds or mammals, is that enough to push the project off the table?
Right.
So it's going to be a very interesting one to watch. It's already been 2.5 years. I think they closed on the purchase in November of 2022, and here we are in April of 2025 with no shovels in the ground yet.
Yeah.
So we'll see where we end up.
So from one piece of litigation to another, let's talk about our second topic, the Red Hook Boat Club. So the Daily Catch reported just this weekend that the fear of the Red Hook Boat Club that it's going to be subject to eminent domain proceedings is actually happening.
Yes.
So let's give a little bit of background on this story as well.
Yes. So eminent domain is not something that we think about as a planning tool in the Dutchess County area. Although, in fact, there are some moments when the town of Red Hook has attempted to use eminent domain. But before we get to that, the issue here is that both the local waterfront development plan for the town of Red Hook and the comprehensive plan that was written in 1993, and which, by the way, is about to be redrafted, that will be a subject of an upcoming catch-up episode, have called for access to the waterfront for the village and town of town of Red Hook residents. So how do you do that? Well, there's 7 miles of shoreline in Red Hook. As we know, much of that land is occupied by estates along the Hudson River. There are some access points or an access point in Tivoli, but as we also know, the CSX and Amtrak rail line tracks run right through a big part of this 7-mile area. It's very difficult to get access to the river. There are places in Tivoli Bays where you can get access, but the water is very silty. At low tide, it's very difficult to put a boat in there. You certainly can't get a motorboat in there. So Robert McKeon has set his sights on the Red Hook Boat Club, a club that dates to the middle of the 20th century, that was once an oil depot. And he feels that this parcel, about a half a mile stretch of land, actually, I don't even think it's a half a mile. I think it's about 500 feet, so that's more like a tenth of a mile. Let me correct myself there. Would be the perfect place to have access to the waterfront.
And the boat club is in Barrytown.
It's in Barrytown, which is a hamlet of the town of Redhook. So what do you do when you want a parcel of private property and you don't have access to it? You can take it by a process called eminent domain. And this is a legal process that requires the town to basically take it over. They have to offer fair market value. In fact, they have to offer the highest market value that an appraiser comes back with. And then they basically take the project over, take over the boat club.
And the town is proposing to pay for this through its preservation fund?
No, they're actually proposing to pay for it out of general fund, which surprised me. That was a detail I learned over the weekend from Robert McKeon himself. The town does have this community preservation fund, and the way that is funded is with a 2% tax on all real estate sales that come in above the median. So if you buy a house for $800,000 and the median is $400,000, you as the buyer pay a 2% tax on the additional $400,000. And that money is accumulating, and right now the fund, if I'm not mistaken, has about $3.1 million in it. The problem with that fund is it's available for the town to use only with willing sellers. And willing is a complicated term as well, and I'm not sure how a court would interpret that, but it looks like Robert McKeon is not going to use that particular fund. He's going to use his operating budget.
And that's probably because the Red Hook Boat Club is not a willing seller.
They are not a willing seller.
So people who are opposed to this notion are saying what?
They're saying this is government overreach, that sure, we may all want access to the waterfront, but not at the expense of a private club that rightfully has ownership rights to it. They're a tax-paying entity. They pay their property taxes duly, and we should find another place from which to do this. And in fact, over the weekend, I also spoke to Mark Molinaro, who many of you listening will remember was Tivoli's youngest mayor and then went on to become Dutchess County executive and was a 1 or 2 term congressman before he was most recently defeated, and who's going to go on to an appointment in the Trump administration. But he and I spoke at some length over the weekend, and he wants to see Tivoli realized as a waterfront development parcel. He says there's a great plan that's already been laid down, that Tivoli owns land on both east and west flanks of the tracks, of the railroad tracks, and he'd like to see Tivoli developed instead of the boat club.
And is the town of Red Hook, will they consider that?
I haven't heard anything about that. McKeon has said in his proposal for tonight's meeting, it'll be held tonight, Monday night, where he'll lay out the idea that this is the only parcel that works for the vision that Red Hook has of waterfront access. So it's going to be a
Mark
very
Molinaro's
interesting...
input seems to dispute that.
Well, his view is there's another alternative, and he'd like to see that developed. We haven't heard yet from Mayor Emily Major in Tivoli Village to know where she's going to stand. And there will be a public hearing after tonight. There's a public hearing that's been set for, I believe it's May 16th, a Friday late afternoon, for people to come out and speak out about it. McKeon told me that many people who may be quiet about expressing their support for the project publicly have told him privately that they really support it. And you and I have heard from people around the community that they do feel that this is an access point that should be given to the community. People also argue, look, the boat club is going to maybe lose their access as a private club, but they still can keep their boats there. They can still, there will be some mechanism for people to have boats there and to have parties there and so forth. So we had originally heard that Robert McKeon was entertaining the idea of a public-private partnership.
What would that...
I don't know where that has gone. Mr. McKeon told me over the weekend that he never heard back from the boat club. The boat club about that idea. The boat club claims that he never checked in with them. So there's a little bit of a he said, she said, and a little bit of a tug of war going on there.
And do we know what a public-private partnership would be?
Not in this case. It's hard to know their view at the boat club is, so what does that mean? We do all the work and the public citizens get to come use our boat club? It's not clear exactly what a public-private partnership would look like.
But that could still be an option.
That could still be an option,
Okay.
and maybe this is a way to get everybody to the table to talk about it. I think it's also worth noting that eminent domain, an attempt was made to use eminent domain in the acquisition of the St. Sylvia's properties in Tivoli. It ended up not going that route, and Bryce Martin, the artist, got involved in purchasing those buildings, the late Bryce Martin, and his widow is continuing to work on that project. But the original intent of the village of Tivoli was, let's take this by eminent domain, Mr. Town, because that way we can assure that terrible things don't happen to this property that was at one time owned by the Archdiocese. There have been other attempts, and of course Robert Moses took big chunks of New York City by eminent domain to build the thruway and parkway system in the city of New York. So it's not something that we haven't heard about before.
Yeah. And we don't know if the Red Hook Boat Club is going to file a lawsuit. That has not been...
Well, interestingly, they already have filed a lawsuit about a zoning change that the town of Red Hook made several months ago. And they didn't like the way that the boat club was treated in that zoning change.
Does the zoning change have anything to do with this eminent domain story?
Indirectly, it does, and it's complicated to explain all of these logistics, but they are first hoping to push back the zoning regulation that essentially outlawed marinas, but they claim they're not a marina anyway and that they were somehow unduly targeted. So that lawsuit is in process right now. I don't think anything has actually happened on it yet, but that's due for an action.
So lawsuits in Rhinebeck, lawsuits in Red Hook, lawsuits everywhere we turn.
Everywhere we turn.
So what's our next milestone in this story? There'll be a town board meeting tonight.
There'll be a town board meeting tonight where I expect that Robert McKeon will lay out his vision for the boat club. He'll lay out the process by which the public hearing will be held. He told me he's going to accept 15 minutes of public comment tonight, so this is not going to be the big debate night. But I expect there will be a very large turnout from the boat club membership.
And then May 16th?
And May 16th will be the public hearing.
Okay.
And we also, and we'll talk about this in an upcoming catch-up as well, are entering election season for the town board. There are 2 open seats. Julia Solomon is not going to run for re-election in November. Christine Kane will, but her seat is up. So it's interesting, maybe interesting to see if this brings out some new candidates for the race that we aren't expecting. So that's something we'll have our eye on as well over the next few weeks.
So we'll be following this story.
We will.
We will.
Aren't
Great.
we always there when
We're
you
always
want
there.
us?
So to close out our podcast, we have what we call our top 3, where Emily and I offer recommendations for listeners. Why don't you go first today, Emily?
Okay. Well, it's so good to be back and be thinking about all these different topics. So my first suggestion is, if you haven't yet gone to Bard College, just to the west of, recently, just to the west of the Fisher Center, the Maya Lin building is going up very, very rapidly. Get an eye on that. It's really something to see.
What will the building be?
It's going to be a performing arts practice center with practice rooms and so forth for dance and performing arts. So it sits just to the west in that big field. So that's one idea for you.
Is there any connection between Maya Lin and Frank Gehry? Did they study together or work together?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. That's a really... I think I researched that at one point and found out that they did.
Gehry designed the Fisher Center.
He designed the Fisher
Yeah.
Center. That's right.
I think there might be some connection between
Some
the two of them.
connection there. Yeah. And my second suggestion is, this is CSA sign-up season. And we have CSAs, Community Supported Agriculture. This is the way you could get a wonderful box of greens and eggs, and there's so many different places to go for your CSA. There's Hardy Roots. There's many, many others. Do a little dig and do a deep dive. My husband swears by the CSA. When he first told me about it, I was like, what? You can get not free, but you can get a box of eggs and rutabagas and turnips and all these
kale.
things. And kale. And I said, don't you need to know what you're going to make ahead of time? He says, no, you just go into the New York Times app and you type in what you have in your CSA share, and that's what you make for dinner. Well, I shouldn't complain because he does all the cooking. So let's leave it to that. And my third item, I always like to give a food item, is I just discovered that Sabrosa's, the Mexican restaurant up on Route 9, up near Gregg Farm, has mole. I love mole. You can get great Mexican mole in Oaxaca. Their mole is really good. It's a chocolate-based mole. It has a little bit of a tang to it. So if you love mole, go up there and get some.
Good tips, good recommendations. Okay.
What
so
about yours, Walter?
here are my
what
three.
do you have?
Here are my three. So my first recommendation is a somewhat new series on Max called The Pit, starring Noah Wiley. It's very, very good, very compelling.
Is that the medical procedural?
So the season is one day in the life of an emergency room in Pittsburgh. That's why it's called The Pit. Wonderful acting, wonderful writing, and very intense. And each episode is 1 hour of the day. So it sort of unfolds in real time. Highly recommend it. That's number one. My second tip is a very specific food item, the black bean hummus, which is sold at the Migliorelli farm stands. It's their proprietary hummus. You can only buy it at their 2 farm stands, and it's really wonderful. It's also only there on certain days of the week.
Oh.
So I try to figure out what days they're going to have it, and I go in and I buy 2 or 3 containers. But
Kenny and Carly will love you pushing that for them.
It's very good, the black bean hummus. And then my final recommendation is Wilcox Park in Milan. I live in Milan, and I frequently go to Wilcox Park to walk or bike ride or run. I think it's over 600 acres. Beautiful spot to go. And it's not that popular. So it's a very quiet, really nice, very serene place to visit.
And I'll add on to that, Walter. You can get the Wilcox Park trail map by just typing that into your Google search engine, and it comes up with a PDF so you can actually know where to go hiking there.
Wonderful. I was there one day and I saw a mountain lion. I believe in a couple years ago. Yeah.
Oh.
They're very elusive.
Who knew?
As soon as they see a human, they bolt, but very interesting. Well, this concludes our 4th episode of The Catch-Up. We hope you enjoyed listening. A big thank you to Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud at Radio Free Rhinecilff for their help producing today's episode. Emily, welcome back. It's been a pleasure catching up with you today.
Always great to see everybody here at the studio.